Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson engineered his own polarization. No accidents caused it. From the beginning, Jackson treated his election as a mandate to override institutions he distrusted. He viewed Congress as corrupt, courts as elitist, and federal bureaucracy as an obstacle to popular will. Those beliefs became his policy. Jackson openly framed himself as the sole legitimate representative of the people, arguing that elections endowed the president with a higher moral authority than unelected officials. This rhetoric justified unilateral action and weakened institutional checks from the other branches that had defined earlier presidencies. In 1832, Jackson vetoed the recharter of the Second Bank of the United States after Congress approved it and after the Supreme Court had already ruled the bank constitutional. He vetoed the recharter of the bank on his beliefs that it would be used as a tool for the wealthy. He claimed the bank concentrated power in the hands of unelected financiers. Where he caused a divide was by not offering an alternative system. The veto message itself was unprecedented in length and tone. Jackson framed the issue as a moral struggle between ordinary citizens and financial elites, deliberately bypassing constitutional reasoning in favor of populist appeal. Jackson then withdrew federal deposits and redistributed them to state banks, chosen largely for political loyalty. This caused credit to expand uncontrollably. Land speculation exploded, and so did inflation. State banks issued loans with minimal oversight, fueling speculative bubbles in Western land. When confidence collapsed, banks failed in rapid succession, wiping out savings and destabilizing local economies. Within 5 years, the U.S. entered the Panic of 1837, one of the worst economic collapses of the 19th century. Jackson also expanded the veto into his own political weapon. He vetoed bills not because they were unconstitutional, but because he disagreed with their purpose. This permanently altered the balance between Congress and the executive. Indian removal cemented his infamy. After Worcester v. Georgia ruled state interference with native nations illegal, Jackson refused enforcement. Federal authority became optional when inconvenient to him. Supreme Court decisions now depended on Jackson's cooperation. That precedent weakened judicial authority far beyond Indian policy. Removal became administered policy. Federal troops, forced treaties, systematic displacement. The trail of tears followed directly. Jackson became polarizing because he proved a president could bypass law, claim popular legitimacy, and still retain mass support. He didn't weaken democracy accidentally, he redefined it around himself. Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon governed as if betrayal were inevitable. Years of political defeat and perceived humiliation shaped Nixon's worldview. He believed opposition was personal and conspiratorial. By his first year in office, Nixon had approved illegal wiretaps on journalists and national security officials. The justification wasn't espionage, it was information control. He believed leaks undermined presidential authority itself. That belief led to the creation of covert White House units operating outside legal oversight. Their first major action was breaking into the office of Daniel Ellsberg's psychiatrist to find material for discredit. Nixon's intentions were not well received by the public. This action revealed that Nixon's concern wasn't national security, but retaliation. Targeting a psychiatrist crossed legal and ethical lines that alarmed even his own aides. Watergate wasn't an isolated lapse, it followed a pattern: surveillance, intimidation, and institutional misuse. The DNC break-in occurred during a re-election campaign Nixon was already winning. Internal polling showed a strong advantage. The operation served no strategic necessity. What followed did. Nixon approved hush money payments. He instructed aides to misuse the CIA to block the FBI investigation. He fired the special prosecutor when legal pressure closed in. The Saturday Night Massacre, as it was called, firing the prosecutor, triggered bipartisan outrage and confirmed fears of authoritarian behavior. The White House tapes destroyed him, not because they showed anger, but calculation. Nixon wasn't panicking, he was managing obstruction step by step. Public support collapsed once Americans heard him weaponizing government agencies to protect himself. Nixon became hated because he demonstrated something new. The presidency could function as a closed system, accountable only when forcibly exposed. George W. Bush. George W. Bush governed with extreme confidence and minimal internal resistance. Bush's leadership style emphasized decisiveness with little deliberation. Advisors who challenged assumptions were sidelined in favor of loyalty and ideological alignment. After 9/11, authority concentrated rapidly in a small executive circle. Intelligence assessments were filtered. Dissenting analyses were minimized or excluded from public briefings. The case for Iraq relied on claims intelligence agencies themselves described as uncertain. Those uncertainties were removed from speeches and presentations. Colin Powell's UN address, later acknowledged as deeply flawed, became the administration's public justification for war. The Iraq invasion succeeded quickly. U.S. forces dissolved the Iraqi military and purged civil institutions overnight, creating hundreds of thousands of unemployed, armed men. Insurgency followed predictably. This decision eliminated administrative continuity and empowered militant groups that filled the power vacuum. Warnings about troop levels and post-war governance had been raised internally. They were dismissed. Hurricane Katrina revealed the same pattern at home. Federal emergency response was slow. FEMA leadership lacked disaster experience. Requests for aid stalled in bureaucracy. The president praised officials while conditions deteriorated visibly. The eye test mattered because they reflected reality. Images of stranded residents and delayed relief contradicted official statements, accelerating public distrust. By 2008, economic collapse completed Bush's reputational collapse. Financial deregulation, ignored risk warnings, and delayed intervention forced emergency bailouts. Bush became hated because the outcomes he was so confident in repeatedly fell short. Donald Trump governed by rejecting the idea of neutral authority. Trump treated institutional independence as a threat, not a safeguard. Loyalty replaced process as the primary measure of legitimacy. From his first days in office, Trump publicly contradicted intelligence agencies, dismissed factual reporting, and framed disagreement as disloyalty. By undermining institutions that validated information, Trump removed external constraints on narrative. Truth became aligned with allegiance. Career officials were sidelined or fired. Inspector generals were removed. Expertise became conditional. Agencies designed to function independently of politics were politicized, eroding internal checks that had historically limited executive overreach. Impeachments didn't weaken support because evidence no longer functioned universally. Facts were interpreted through identity, not verification. COVID exposed the consequences. Public health decisions became symbolic of ideals rather than technical, reducing compliance and increasing confusion. Federal guidance shifted publicly. Scientific agencies were contradicted. States competed for resources. Messaging fractured along partisan lines during a public health emergency. By the 2020 election, institutional trust was already degraded. Trump's refusal to concede wasn't a departure. It was consistent with years of delegitimizing elections, courts, and media. Trump is polarizing because he didn't lose legitimacy with his base. He destroyed the conditions that were supposed to form a public consensus.